Well, I think it's a fair thing. And one thing we said is that the construction season is coming. We've put about $11.8 billion on the table in the province of Ontario to go to public transit, to go to green infrastructure, recreational infrastructure, rural infrastructure. And I must say, I'm a bit impatient because that money has been on the table. Ontarians want things to happen. We need to create the jobs this summer. You know, Amanda, we can't afford as a country to lose one construction season. So what we said is that whilst the Ontario government has opened one stream, and they're considering another stream this morning, although it excludes the GTA, which is the a significant part of exclusion because a lot of congestion is around the GTA. So we need to get to the bottom of that. But the other thing is that we want to work with municipalities, and because that's the best way for us to really get to the job, which is build the infrastructure. Infrastructure should be outside of the political realm. This is about, we're looking at decades ahead, and we're looking at things that are making a difference in the lives of people.
In this case, we're talking about wastewater, we're talking about water systems, and partly that is driven, I imagine, by climate change. Some of it is just aging infrastructure, the cities are growing. How quickly can we update these systems? Because the need is kind of dire in some places.
Well, if you look in Canada, and it's true probably in North America, a lot of these systems came online in the 1970s. And a lot of these infrastructure, which I would say we take for granted, have come into their full life cycle. So it's whether about wastewater treatment, it's about drinking water, it's about roads, it's about bridges. So there's like a momentum. We need to close the gap. You know, we have been, I would say there's been a lack of investment over a good decade. But everyone who's watching us know that when you stop investing for a decade, things become exponentially expensive. So now everything comes at the same time. What I've announced today with John Tory was exactly to prevent the impact of extreme weather events. I mean, we see the cost of climate change now. We had to invest $150 million to protect, for example, Midtown Toronto and also the York region from floods, which you've seen in 2018. People lost their home. A number of stores were impacted. So for me, if we don't invest in adaptation, we'll have to invest in remediation.
All, of course, good and necessary and will create jobs and save money down the road. It's hard to have this conversation, Minister, and not remember when we talk about wastewater and water that there are many Canadians who can't turn on their taps and get drinking water. And this has been a problem for First Nations. It continues to be a problem. How do we get that infrastructure spending, not just out the door, but working?
Well, we need to move faster, Amanda. They call me the impatient minister, and there's a reason. Because what you said, it's about people. For me, this is not about politics. This is not about a plan. This is really about getting the job done. So that's why we say to the provincial governments here in Ontario and otherwise, the money is on the table. For once in my life, I don't need the finance minister. The $33 billion that was negotiated with provinces over 10 years is there, and we want to make it work for people. So we said, you know what, we're going to continue to work with the provinces. Some have gone faster than others, but at the same time, we're going to direct. We doubled up the gas tax refund that we're giving to the municipalities. This is about $2.2 billion in the system, and this is about making sure we get the job done this summer and we get people to work this summer.
As we get projects underway, the federal government will look at contractors. SNC is on the list. One of the questions that's now being raised about SNC is, could you change the rules that if it faces a prosecution and then is found in the wrong, that you could still allow it to be a federal government contractor? Is that on the table?
Well, that's something we'd have to consider. You know what? When you're looking at the SNC-Lavalin is the largest construction engineering company in Canada. So when you're looking at the big picture, you have to see what would be the impact of that. What would that mean when we come to big infrastructure projects that are going on in Canada? So I think we'll have to reflect and think about one of which is obviously uphold the rule of law. Every Canadian would agree with that. The other thing is also looking at what does that mean for us and what does that mean for infrastructure and construction in Canada. So we're going to be taking a look at that. I think the minister has been saying we're going to see. We're going to look at best practice around the world, and we're going to be hopefully aligning ourselves with best practices. And that's why in this scheme, I'm always looking at what's the public interest. That's really the test that we need to apply as elected officials.
And if the public interest is served by this big company still being able to do the projects, it sounds as though the government might be open to the idea of changing the rules.
Well, we'll see that. You know, what matters to Canadians is that those who have committed crime get convicted. You know, I'm the first one to say that. I'm a lawyer. I was an ethics officer in a big corporation. I said, get the people who did anything wrong convicted. But let's not impact the pensioners, the suppliers, the workers who joined, for example, SNC-Lavalin last week. They have nothing to do with that. Those facts and the acts and omissions that occurred like a decade ago, and some of them even longer than that. So let's get after the folks who have committed wrongs, but let's make sure that we don't impact in the way that people who have nothing to do with it, or, for example, municipalities to end up having less competition in the market. So we need to balance that when we look at the national interest.
It would be very reassuring to SNC, its investors, its employees, and its business partners if it knew it would be protected in this way. Is there a way to signal that ahead of?
Well, we'll have to reflect, because when you look at that, first we need to look at everything that is on the table, look at the facts, reflect, look at best practices, making sure that you know, we uphold the rule of law and the highest rules of ethics that you would find. Look at what other OECD countries would do, and just align ourselves. We don't want to be a business environment which is less competitive than anyone else. We want to be, obviously, be forceful when it comes to white-collar crime, because that's what Canadians would expect from us, and that's what we believe in as a country of the rule of law. That's why investors come in Canada, because of stability, predictability, and rule of law. At the same time, we need to look at what are the remedies. You know, the deferred prosecution agreement was just another tool in the toolbox. No one has said that there's nothing wrong with that. Many countries of the OECD have these tools because they realize that this is the best way to get a conviction, because, by the way, the company comes, turns the evidence, you make sure that the company pays a very heavy fine. You can impose remedies that a judge cannot. You can impose that a company would close its operation in certain countries, close a division, fire certain employees. A judge can only order damages. So this was a tool in the toolbox. Now we are where we are, but we need to look ahead and make sure that we act in the public interest.
Of course, we've gone from the discussion about DPA, is it good, is it bad, to the process. It's become political. How difficult has it been inside cabinet this past period? You're right in the middle of it. Has it been very hard and straining?
Well, you know, when you're at cabinet, it's because you have a strong voice. I have enormous respect for my colleagues. Both Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott were colleagues. Jane was also a friend. We dealt a lot. I dealt on committees with them. She was president of Treasury Board. We did a lot together. I respect that they defend their principle. But you know, Amanda, I also have the right to defend mine. I'm there to stand up for workers. I'm here to stand up for the economy. I'm here to stand up for rural Canada. And you know what? I can do that within all the rules of ethics and the legal framework that is imposed on us as cabinet members. And you know, if in Canada we chose to have the Attorney General and the Justice Minister being in the same person, and this has worked for 150 years now, if we chose that, is because we thought that in matters of national interest, it would be good for the Attorney General to be able to listen or to hear from other cabinet members whilst remaining independent and sovereign in her decision as Attorney General. That's how we frame the system. And if you look at the 150 years in our country, it worked pretty well. So as a lawyer, I said, let's look at things, let's look at we can improve, but let's also pause for a minute, because this has been working well and serving Canadians for a long time. You are, as you say, impatient. One of the complaints about the Canada Infrastructure Bank has been that it's slow to actually get projects, big projects, out the door. Can we change that? Is something going to happen to make more money flow? Well, there was anyone who's listening to us, there was a startup kind of approach. You know, we needed to build from within, recruit people, you know, make sure that we have the talent. The Infrastructure Bank was endowed in a big mission, which is to deliver more infrastructure for Canadians faster. But there's always, when you start something big and ambitious, it takes a bit of time. Now we have recruited. Pierre Lavallée is our CEO, is doing a great job. Janice, which is the chair, has been doing a great job as well. They are having discussions. I think there's dozens of projects which are currently being looked at. There's a lot of discussion with provinces, territories, private sponsors. The role of the bank is to crowd in investors, is to make sure that we would, for example, take a part of an equity to allow project to go forward. And it's not because there's a lack of desire to build more infrastructure. For me, the Infrastructure Bank of Canada is just another tool in the toolbox. The government needs to do what we do, like we did today in disaster mitigation and investing $150 million here. But there are types of projects which, you know what, if we have the private sector coming in with us to build stuff and to do it faster and to do more at the same time, that means our tax dollar are going further. Why not? And I think Canadians expect that from us.